Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1054, and today's date is August 21st, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, it's really starting to look like 2008, and if we go back to August of 2008, we see very similar things where the stock market is continually being pushed up. We're seeing a lot of dead cat bounces, and people are thinking to themselves, hey, look, everything's starting to look okay. But when we look through all of this, we can see that there's a lot of companies that are continually laying off more and more people. The bank's financials, when we look at this, they look absolutely awful. Right now, they're insolvent. And what we're seeing is more and more companies are going to be laying off people as we move through this fall. And we see Caterpillar, their sales, they have been declining for about 44 months or so. During the Great Recession, it was around 19 months. Caterpillar said they're going to be cutting 155 jobs. And they're also going to be ending the production of its on-highway vocational trucks. They'll be selling divisions, because what's happening here, things are really starting to break apart. In the housing market, we know that Canada, in Vancouver especially, their housing market has been one gigantic bubble. And back a month ago, realty companies and real estate boards were reporting that deals were falling through. And we reported on this, that foreign buyers were forfeiting their deposits. And they were saying, you know something, we're out. Well, fast forward to today, and according to realtor Brent Eilers, using the LMS listing data, there were only 3 home sales in West Vancouver between August 1st and the 14th. Now, if you compare this to the 52 during the same period of last year, that's a decrease of 94%. And what we're seeing is that Vancouver average home prices are continually dropping. If we look at January 16th, we started out around 1.4 million. It moved up in March to about almost 1.5 million, and now it has dropped to 1.1 million. A huge, steep decline. We see the bubble is popping, and this is going to spread. We're seeing this throughout the United States. We're seeing it in the Hamptons. We're seeing it in New York. We're seeing it in San Francisco, and this is spreading. Out in Ukraine, we see there were about 100 shells and 160 mines launched into Donetsk, and this is continuing. We also see the Wall Street Journal, where they're saying that Ukraine is out there saying that Russia has moved troops onto the border, and they are ready to escalate tensions. Now, this is pure propaganda, because the Pentagon is out there saying that there are absolutely no signs at this time that we can report where Russia is getting ready to attack. What they have going on in the entire area of Crimea is a drill. It's a military exercise. Now, of course, Ukraine is using this for propaganda purposes. We see the Obama administration and the corporate media using this for propaganda purposes, but the satellite information and everything that's going on, this has been planned, and the Pentagon realizes that this is all it is. But we can see there are 2 things happening here. We have the corporate media, the neocons who want war, Ukraine who wants war, and we have the other side who's saying, no, we don't see any of this, and we have no proof of any of it, and Russia has been in contact with us saying that these are military exercises, and that is all it is. But of course, what we can see is that Poroshenko, the neocons, their whole plan right now is to push war. We see that Russia has placed electronic and signals intelligence systems on the border of Ukraine near Kharkiv, but it is in Russia. Now, the question is, why is that there? Well, this mobile electronic intelligence, it appeared in early August when Ukraine has started its provocative actions in Crimea. And we can see right now that Russia is leaving this in this area because, again, we can see that Ukraine and the neocons and the elite, they're pushing war in this area. Biden is out there with Poroshenko, and they're discussing what is going on in Ukraine, the surge in fighting in Ukraine. And Biden is out there, and he sent a message to Russia saying that the world is watching and underscored the need to de-escalate the situation. Pure propaganda. And we have to remember, Biden's son is involved and on the board of directors of the gas companies. He was placed on the board as soon as the coup d'etat was completed and Hunter was put into place. And now we see Biden is out there trying to push the war because they have investments there. They want the gas flowing from Russia through Ukraine into Europe. They don't want the Turkish Stream. So we can see all of this is happening at once. We see Yemen's former president, Abdullah Saleh, saying that Russia could use the military bases in Yemen to fight terrorism. He said, in the fight against terrorism, we reach out and offer all facilities, our airports, our ports. We are ready to provide this to the Russian Federation. Now, we understand that he really has no clout to implement any of these type of things, but the party he heads now runs a political council that controls much of the country along with the Houthi movement. And coincidentally, this took place after 48 hours where the U.S. and the Pentagon, they withdrew their personnel from Saudi Arabia and sharply reduced the number of staff elsewhere who were assisting in the planning of the Saudi-led air campaign in Yemen. Fewer than 5 U.S. service people are now assigned full-time to the Joint Combined Planning Cell. Finally, what we're seeing is that the Yemen pivot takes place just 5 days after China appears to have finally joined the Syria proxy war, announcing that it would provide aid and military training to the Assad government. So is the U.S. right now pulling out of the entire area? Well, it's starting to look that way, and it's starting to look like it's moving out of certain areas. And it looks like we have Russia and China moving in, and the United States government central bankers, they are losing the Middle East right now. And again, we have to remember what this means. The entire system is built on the petrodollar system. And we can see that things are drastically changing now in the Middle East. And once these countries take back their governments and kick out the puppet governments and decide, you know something, we don't want to sell the oil using the dollar. And this is where the main problem comes in. Because if the United States government central bankers allow this to happen, their system collapses automatically. So they have two choices. Let it happen, let it collapse, or start a war and then have it collapse after that. And I think this is where they're moving right now. We see out in Turkey, there was a suicide attack at a wedding party, and it looks like at least 51 people have been killed with another 69 wounded. The government right now in Turkey is saying that it is ISIS who carried out the attacks. Now, very interestingly, ISIS never reports that they attacked anyone in Turkey. It's always the government saying that it was ISIS. And we have to remember Erdogan, his son, they support the Islamic State. They supply the weapons. They supply aid. They help them if they're wounded. And a lot of the Islamic State is trained in Turkey. So we have to watch that situation very, very carefully. Even though Turkey is moving closer to Iran and Russia, it still seems they're on the same track where they want Assad removed. And that seems like it has not changed at all. As we reported on Saturday, there was a very close call between U.S. and Syria, where Syrian Su-24 warplanes were flying in the area near the Kurds. They were bombing that area. The U.S. said they hit the moderate rebels. They were chased off by warplanes by the United States. And again, we have to say, the United States, they have no reason to be in Syria. They weren't invited in there. They invaded a sovereign country, and now they're telling the president of his own country that he cannot be in this area. Think about this for a second, of what the United States has just done. They have separated this area, and they're protecting it. And we can see that the Syrian government, well, they're not listening. Even though the U.S. has warned not to fly in this area, the Syrian government said, well, we can fly wherever we want. This is our country. And we will fly our jets in this area. So they flew their jets right into that area in the Kurdish-held area of Hasaka, and it didn't matter what the U.S. said. Now we can see how this is starting to build up now, and this is something that we need to watch very, very carefully. Right now we see the Syrian forces and the Kurdish fighters, they've agreed upon a Russian brokered ceasefire in that area. And we'll have to see how this plays out, because what we know is that United States government central bankers, they're doing whatever they possibly can to push war. And we see on the other side, Russia is trying to keep the peace. Now, the Turkish prime minister was out there saying that Turkey is ready to play a more active role in the region, and they're ready to accept that the Syrian president Assad may be part of the transitional period in the country, but in the future, there is no place for him. So really, they're doing the same exact thing that they've done before, and it doesn't seem like anything has changed there whatsoever. We see the Syrian rebels, well, they quickly endorsed the rebranded Nusra Front. And as soon as the Nusra Front no longer call themselves the Nusra Front, because now they're no longer on the UN terrorist watch list, this is what the United States did as a strategic move. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, a huge number of soldiers appeared, and now this new group with this new name is stronger than ever, they're saying. This was planned from the beginning, because we have to remember, Russia wanted the United States to list who were the moderate rebels, list who were the terrorists. Now the U.S. decided to change the name of their terrorist group, and they don't have to list the terrorists right now. And now they can bring in the rest of the soldiers that they've been training in Jordan into the mix. And they can say these are not terrorists now. They're part of the moderate rebels. And this is exactly what they're doing. Now, very interestingly, we reported that the U.S. was moving their nukes from Turkey to Romania. And now we're getting contradictory reports regarding the relocation of the U.S. nuclear weapons from the Incirlik Air Base. Now remember, on Monday, the Stimson Center for Washington, D.C. based nonprofit think tank, they released this report urging the policymakers in the U.S. to remove these nuclear weapons because they were afraid that Turkey was going to get them or terrorists were going to get them and use them later on. So later on, Thursday, August 18th, Active said that the U.S. forces have started an operation of relocation of its nuclear weapons, and they were moving them to Romania. Then the Romanian foreign minister officially denied that the country is going to host the U.S. nuclear weapons. So right now, we're getting reports that the U.S. is actually not moving its nuclear weapons. So at this moment, we're getting reports that the nukes are still in Incirlik Air Base. And we'll have to follow up on this to see what is happening. And we have to remember something very important. Many, many months ago, we reported that there was a tactical nuke that was snuck into Syria, into the Aleppo region. Now, we know there's a huge battle, a huge offensive going on still in that area. We know the United States does not want to lose that entire area. And we can start to see how this all plays into each other, where when everything looks like it's not going in the way the U.S. wants, we can see the U.S. at that point, the neocons, they might explode one of these nukes, blame it on a terrorist group, blame it on Turkey, blame it on anyone, where then they can bring in more and more troops into this area, because we can see already that the U.S. has built 2 bases in this Kurd area. We know the French have also done the same. We see the U.S. is trying to protect this area, keeping Syrian forces out of the area, keeping Russian forces out of the area, and they are ready to fire upon or use force to keep the forces out of this area. So this is something that we need to watch, because we can see that things are really starting to heat up in this area, and the U.S., they are totally backed in a corner. They have no way out of this situation, because if they just decide to leave this area, the entire system just starts to crumble apart. The petrodollar would be doomed, and the entire U.S. economy will completely fall apart. if they decide to make war, they can cover this entire thing up. Doesn't mean the economy's not going to collapse. They just have a way of pointing their finger at some other country or group, saying that they're the ones who caused it. So this is something that we need to watch very, very carefully, because we can see out in Ukraine, things are heating up. We see out in the Middle East, things are starting to heat up. And in the Pacific, also, things are starting to heat up. So everything is all happening at once. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.